Tracey, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I am super excited to be talking to you. And you have a really, really impressive background, seven-time board member, former president, and also advisor to some of the world's fastest growing tech companies. It's really, really admirable. So I'd love to maybe start out with you sharing a little more about what it is that you're focused right now and what are you doing?
Oh gosh. Well, thank you, Biva, for having me here today. It's an honor. And yeah, today I call myself semi-retired. I have many, many projects going on to keep me busy. I sit on five boards that are one is a public company, for a private. And I focus on high growth software companies. That's really what my background's all about. And then I have recently written a book that will come out on March 25th. The title of the book is Hers for the Taking, Your Path to the C-Suite and Beyond. And my goal and intent is really to inspire more and more women to reach for the C-suite and to think about what they want to be doing long term. So I'm definitely keeping busy.
Yes, that's, everything that you're mentioning, both, what I read about what you've accomplished and what you're still doing. It's no small task, and I'm sure there's a lot of bids for your time. I'd love for you maybe to tell us a little more of the origin story or focus on kind of how you got to doing what you're doing, and ending up in the boardroom and now obviously in the advisory positions and everything that you're doing. I understand it's a longer journey, and I'd love for us, to share it with the audience. And maybe you can start by telling us a little more about what was your childhood like? How did you grow up? How was
Yeah.
little Tracy?
Yes, absolutely. A key component to my message is that if I can join the C-suite or be on boards, so can you. And I was taught early on at a young age that you can have anything that you want in life as long as you work hard for it and you go figure out how to get a job and how to accomplish great things. And so that was really underscoring to how I was raised. And the same is true in business. I fell into sales. I didn't know. I thought I was going to be a lawyer up until I was 22 and graduating from college, but I fell into sales and I just had a really good run working for some great companies. But with that said, I don't have an MBA. I went to college, but it wasn't an Ivy League college. I didn't go to a prep school. I had this vision, I think, when I was in my, teens and 20s that the people that ran companies were, created. Their grandfathers and great grandfathers ran companies. And I'm a living testament that doesn't have to be true. That it's mostly about setting lofty goals and reaching for the stars and then doing the work.
So I love the message of accessibility, and obviously, through these conversations, through all of your work, through your book, I love how you break it down. So it sounds like you were going to school for a law degree, or you with an
I
intent to become a lawyer?
Yeah, I have a bachelor's in economics, and
Okay.
so I worked very hard in school. My dad said that you can go to law school, but there at the time there's one lawyer for every five people in the state of California, so you better be a good one. And I can't afford private school. And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" He said, "It means you need to go to one of the best state schools in California." And I said, "What does that mean?" It means you need a 4.0. And so I worked really hard in college. And when I say I fell into sales, it was very literal. It was my senior year and I needed to raise a little bit of money. And I fell into a job for AT&T that was supposed to be a 2-week project. And we did a really good job at doing what they wanted us to do. And so that turned into a project for the entire last year of college, and then I ended up working for them when I graduated. So it was, I think that's true in life for a lot of executives too, that it's good to have a plan, but it's also good to be agile because life throws lots of things at you, and just being able to make, lemonade out of lemons, based upon, what's happening with you, I think is a real opportunity.
Yeah, because it's not like one perfect recipe, right? Some people say you have to know what you want and go for specifically those goals. But like you said, also there's this flow of life and things that happen, the doors that open, the people that you meet. And I guess I'm thinking sales, and if you're good at sales and you get into sales leadership, because it's such a kind of heartbeat of any company, right? Livelihood, then it makes sense kind of that it is a strong path into leadership and the next steps that would lead to executive type of positions, because I think one of the things I was reading in your book, you like 7 times, like it was like you took a company from around 100 million in revenue to 700. I mean, that's a really, really impressive growth trajectory. So how, like, let's maybe, when you kind of fell into sales, because so many people will be able to relate. I mean, so many stories that I hear, including my own, it's just kind of like it wasn't intentional. It's like something happened, you talk to a friend of a friend, acquaintance, or somebody in your network, you went interviewed and you got a job, right? Within a function. How was sales, did it feel like it's for you, or kind of how long did you stay in sales, and kind of how did that journey develop for you?
It's funny, when I received my first job in sales, I called my father, who was my role model, who was an attorney. And I said, I've got this great job in sales. And at the time, I was going to make about $24,000. And he literally said to me, what in the world can a 22-year-old do that's worth $24,000? He just thought that was insane. And I called him back 90 days later and I said, I was wrong. Dad, I'm not going to actually make $24,000. I'm going to make $12,000. And if I sell something, I get the other half. And he said, I'm pretty sure that's illegal. You need to quit right now. And so thankfully, I didn't actually quit. I stuck with it. And, like any job, there was ups and there were downs throughout my career. But I took a number of lateral roles. When I was 26, I wanted to manage people so desperately. They didn't know what to do with me. AT&T, the average person in leadership was probably in their 40s. And so they finally said, do you want to take over accounts receivable? And I didn't even know what that was. And so I said yes. And I took a pay cut of about 50% to do that job. But I'll say I learned more in that role than I did in any role in subsequent years for the next 5 years, because I didn't know anything about the job. So I had to figure out how to problem solve and how to leverage my team to be part of the solution and to teach us, each other, how we could go from being one of the worst in the country to one of the best. So I would say I did spend most of my career in sales, and I did go into sales leadership eventually. But like most executives, they will tell you there was not one clear linear path to executive roles. If you are an engineer and then you become a managing engineer and a super managing engineer, and all you know is engineering, oftentimes you become a mile high but an inch deep, because you don't know how the rest of the company is running. And so most leaders, whether they're sales, marketing, finance, it doesn't matter, they've held lots of different positions so that they really can understand what each of the functions of the company is going through, to help make the best decisions for a company and an organization.
That makes sense. And I was just wondering, so would you recommend for people who have the ambition, right, to advance their career, to kind of navigate it or put the puzzle pieces together in a way that they get exposure and positions within different functions? And if so, are there some functions that are more important than others?
Yeah, so two things. I think as you think about your career, first and foremost, I really encourage people to think long term and to play the long game. I was in my mid 30s when I was sitting with a mentor and I wanted a new role and I felt really stuck. But I didn't know what I wanted to do. So she said, "Well, what do you want to do? What's your goal?" And I said, "Well, I want to have more impact." And she literally started laughing, like really laughing, like belly laughing. Like I looked behind me thinking, is somebody, behind me making faces or something? And there wasn't. I turned around and looked back at this woman. And I said, "What's so funny? Why are you laughing?" She goes, "I don't know what impact means." You can ask any man in my organization, what do you want to do? And he'll tell you, I want to be the CEO of a startup. I want to run sales. I want to be an SVP in marketing. What do you want to do? And I said, I don't know. And I was at Cisco Systems at the time. And she said, well, do you want to run sales for Cisco? And I looked at her. I said, I'm thinking, what are you talking about? I'm 35 years old. At the time, Cisco was probably $20 billion. And I said, no, no, I don't have the skills. She goes, well, what about North America? And I was just flabbergasted. I said, absolutely not. And she goes, well, give me a reason. And I said, well, I don't have the skills. And she said, give me another reason. I said, I have two kids under 6. There's no way I could do that right now. And she asked me a question that changed my life. She said, would you do it in 10 or 15 years when your kids are older and you have had more experience? And I literally stopped and looked at this person who was asking me if I would be willing to run a company in 10 or 15 years, which implied she thought maybe I could. I didn't think so, but someone else did. And I said, well, maybe. And her advice was, well, then get the experience over the next 10 years so that you have that option.
Mhm.
And I think that's the mistake that a lot of people make is, what do you want to do in 10 or 15 years? A lot of folks don't even think about it, or they're too afraid to dream big because perhaps life is chaotic and crazy right now. But it won't always be. That's just a point in time where you are, especially if you're earlier in your career where things, there's a lot coming at you all the time. So it's this, I really encourage people think long term, set a big, outrageous goal, and then you can start to try to line up how you get from where you are to the
Mhm.
next role. And you'll probably not go exactly as you think. It probably won't be linear, as I said earlier.
Yeah.
But give yourself, the optionality to do something big, and then you can, the next step is to be great at your job and to go for that next promotion.
It's interesting you brought it up because that was one of the situations I wrote down as kind of one of the things to ask you about during this conversation. So thank you for sharing it. And I hear it a lot too, and I can even relate from my own journey that yes, we want something different. We feel that something is not working, something is out of alignment, but we don't know what is that goal to strive for. So how would you recommend that people can figure it out, that
Yeah.
long-term goal?
Yeah. I mean, it starts by taking time. I have spent, if you do, for anyone who's listening that does run sales, it's all about human potential. And I've seen people achieve amazing goals uh, that, frankly, most didn't think they could achieve. And it starts with really deciding to do something big, right? It was Henry Ford. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right, is what he said. So it starts with setting that target. So, how do you set that target? You got to spend time really thinking about what you love to do. For me, trying on different roles and taking laterals, sometimes even going backwards, going a few steps backwards to get into a new industry or a new company helped me to figure out what I wanted to do long term. Friends, family, mentors can all be great advisors to you as well. It was several times in my life. It was a mentor who tapped me on the shoulder, much like that earlier story I was sharing. Who and someone would say, "You can do more." And literally, I'm looking up, going, "I can do more." Like I'm so busy right now. What are you talking about? I don't think I can do more. And yet, somebody watching you know, me and saying something like that, got me thinking, well, if they see something, then perhaps it's true. So, spend time on your goals, spend time on what you love doing, talk to others, and make sure you have advisors around you that can encourage you and help you steer you to get to those big lofty goals.
So that theme definitely came across as you were talking, about your story, and you even mentioned kind of from the get-go that your dad or your parents essentially taught you that you can achieve anything or anything is possible. I'm paraphrasing here, with hard work. So how much of that belief did you internalize from early on, and how much do you think it played a role in your success?
Uh, you know, a heart, a strong work ethic was embedded in me
Mhm.
early on. It just, if you wanted a new pair of jeans or you wanted, something, we just didn't have a lot of extra money. And so go get a paper route, go work at McDonald's, go, just go get a job, babysit, do whatever you need to do to achieve what you want. But work ethic was embedded in me. I would say when it comes to having a career, you know, that was something I learned along the way. I mean, imposter syndrome, especially for women, is very, very real. And if you had told me when I was 22 that I would help run a company, I would have laughed. I would have said that that's just not possible. I didn't know anyone who had ever done such a thing. So, you know, striving to do something big is that really came as I continued on in my career, but it also very much, I would say, came from the mentors that helped me along the way.
And so even you were kind of, it sounds like maybe the initial kind of idea for being a lawyer might have come from your dad being a role model, or, might have had some influence, but also, as you mentioned, this other mentor. How do you recommend that we get the right mentors? Because we can be surrounded, people can be surrounded by different executives, different managers. But a lot of them also are very kind of centered on their own success, right? And getting the goals that they need, and not always champions. So how do we identify the right mentors, right? That will also champion for us. So kind of be there, like you said, there was somebody who actually asked you a question, right? And invited you to think differently, to think bigger.
Yeah. So I get asked that a lot. And um, most people, especially executives, have had help along the way. So my recommendation, mentors will change throughout your career because you need different people advising you at different steps along the way, most often. And so I recommend that you pick someone that's one level or, maximum two levels above what you aspire to do in the next 12 or 24 months. And what I mean by that is if you have a relationship with someone who's, very senior, 3, 4, 5 levels up in the company, that's great, but that person might give you advice that's inappropriate for where you are right now. You really want to learn from someone who's doing the next job that you aspire to have, or again, perhaps one level above that. How do you get their help? Well, I think it starts. I always recommend that you keep it informal. You don't want to say, "Hey, would you be my mentor?" Because that sounds like a lot. Everyone's busy, and if I don't have a relationship with you yet, it sounds, it could be perceived as too much of a burden. But reaching out to say, "Hey, I really admire you, and I'm trying to figure out, my next steps in my career. Would you be willing to spend 15, 20 minutes with me? Could I buy you a cup of coffee if you live in the same city, or catch up on a Zoom for 20 minutes in the course of the next couple of weeks?" Most people are going to say okay to that. And then I think it's really important that the mentee take that time very seriously. You have to have a plan for that meeting. What's the agenda that you want to set? You want to make sure that potential mentor knows that you're taking their time seriously, and that you take notes throughout the meeting, that you recap the meeting, and that you send a follow up saying, "Thank you so much. These were my key takeaways. And would it be okay if I followed up with you in the next few months. And it's as simple as that. Most people are going to say yes as long as you hit it off. And then keeping that person appraised the next time you meet, remind them, this is what we talked about. This is what I've done as a result of your advice, and I want to thank you because this is what changed. So, feedback can be really important to whoever that mentor is. So, that would be my mentoring advice. I do also recommend that you have a broader group. A lot of people call it their board of advisors, and it's their informal board, much like a CEO has a board of directors. Most people that aspire to move up inside of their company will also have a group of advisors, and those are several people from different walks of life. They might be inside of what you're doing. If you're in finance, they might be in finance, but they could also be in engineering. They could be in sales. Just somebody who sees you, sees how you're showing up at work, and somebody who's deeply vested in you that can give you honest feedback to help you continue to do well. And those folks will stay along with you throughout the journey. So again, if you're lucky enough to have that relationship with a trusted VP or senior vice president, I would put that person on your advisory board. And you're probably not going to meet with them every quarter or every month, but a couple times a year, when you're having a hard time or you're making important decisions, you would want to reach out to that person to get some worldly advice.
I love that. I love the kind of the idea of building your own advisory board, that it's not just is you're intentionally growing your career, and including kind of that growing your network and focusing on that, and kind of the analogy of the advisory board of that it's not just one person, one mentor, because like you said, I think you can really I don't know what the right word. Maybe it's much more effective to have several people. Like you said, it's not going to be like you meet every week, right? It might be twice a year, like you said, once every quarter, right? So it's not like you will be busy having to have 7 meetings, right, every week. It will be they're busy, you're busy. But if you start kind of building it out versus just over focusing on just one mentor relationship, I think that's really great, kind of perspective to look at things and to approach it from. Um, there was something, so I wanted to ask you about this hard work. I think that women and overall, not just women, right? We are so socialized with this concept of hard work, from school, right, to the narrative around us. It's hard work, hard work. I think that we have internalized the hard work aspect really well. But then there's this kind of side, it's not just about hard work. You could be working really hard and not get to kind of the positions, to boardroom, to positions of real influence and uh, not necessarily quick, but like advancement within, you know, uh, like a good time frame, right? You could spend all your life working hard. How much of the kind of hard work versus right people and relationships kind of has been the I don't know, quote unquote recipe, or your experience over your career?
Yes, so I know exactly what you're talking about, and you are 100% spot on. A lot of women, you know, a lot of women are afraid to share their accomplishments, and they believe that if I just work really hard and keep my head down, people will recognize my achievements and I'll get naturally promoted. And for some reason, we are just naturally a bit more shy. I think it's has to do with society, and women have a hard time really sharing all that they're doing. And my strategy in that and my counsel to women uh, on that issue, the term that I always laugh at, because men and women will say, "Oh, that person's really good at managing up," and what they're really
Yeah,
saying
exactly.
is they're communicating all the great things that they're doing in the company. It almost implies that they're manipulative or doing something wrong. And I always laugh as an executive that I don't perceive the people that are sharing what they have figured out how to do better than others that are contributing to their success, I never see those folks as managing up. I actually see them as solving real problems and then communicating how they solve those problems so that the company can figure out how to share those learnings across the entire organization. And so the people that get promoted in my organizations are always the folks that are really good at problem solvers. At the end of the day, that's all the C-suite and the CEO are really doing. They're trying to understand what are the barriers and the roadblocks to success. How do I remove them so my company can go faster and compete better and ultimately dominate their particular industry? So for men and women that are really good at problem solving. And so regardless of function, engineering, sales, marketing, it doesn't matter. Hey, this problem is really getting in the way of everybody inside of our function. What if I was to go tap other people in my organization? Could be peers, could be, people cross-functionally, whatever's happening in sales usually touches marketing, it touches product management, it touches engineering, it touches all kinds of people in the org. What if I was to say, hey, everybody, I've got this issue that I think could really make the company more successful. Can we all work on this together? And then maybe I tell my boss or my boss's boss, hey, I'm working on this issue. Can I come back next month, next week, next quarter, and just share progress? And I want to bring the key team members too, so they get some visibility and you can understand what we're doing to help the company to be more successful. That kind of collaboration, women are exceptional at,
Mhm.
and yet all that you're really doing is solving a problem that needs to be solved. It's not altruism. You're making your job easier and you're making lots of other people successful at the same time. And that can be done at every level. That can be done at individual contributors level, and that can be done at, so that is what senior vice presidents do every day.
Yeah. And that's really good advice or point, especially because I mean, people do have different aspects of their personality and strengths and psyche. And sometimes, because I do, I interview people and I help them understand, what is working and what's not working when, it comes to their career and what would be better aligned. And one of, kind of these aspects of personality that comes into play is that some people are more focused on doing and they're not naturally strong on that talking, that self-promotion, that kind of that communication aspect, because they are really good doers and problem solvers actually. And once you know that about yourself, I think this is really good advice. You can reflect, are you kind of promoting yourself? Are you talking enough about what you are accomplishing, right? What you're driving and how you're solving problems? Because what I'm hearing you say, it's like, you have to talk about it.
Yeah, communication skills are critical, and everyone can learn to improve their communication skills. When I was in my 20s, public speaking was terrifying to me.
Mhm.
And yet I also know it's important. If you're not communicating what you're doing inside of your role or what your team is doing inside of the company, then how in the world can anyone know what you're doing? We're all so busy during the day. So communication skills are critical. But I think the thing that I would, just offer a slight difference in perspective. It's not what am I doing that's great that I would feel comfortable communicating. I would reframe that to what what am I focused on and what is the team of people, even if I don't manage people, what are my peers? What am I working with my peers on, my cross-functional
Mhm.
team with to make the company more successful? And everyone should be talking about that because that's why the company employs us. And so it's not about what I'm doing, it's what am I doing to help the company, and really spending time. Again, it does take a little bit of time to think through what
Mhm.
those two or three things are that you want to share with your boss and your boss's boss, and then also to get some feedback. I loved the TV show. I don't know if you ever saw it. It was on probably 10 years ago, called The Undercover Boss. And in the show, one of the CEOs for these big companies would literally dress up in disguise. I mean, he or she would put on a costume, and then they would go work with the frontline people that are closest to the customers. So there was one where it was a CEO of an airline, and he's literally like loading baggage on the airplane. And he's asking questions like, hey, this seems kind of efficient. Why do we do it this way? And when you ask open-ended questions, the workers would start saying, oh my gosh, it's so ridiculous. We waste so much time doing this, and it's so hard to do that. And oh gosh, well, how do the customers feel about it? Well, the customer gets so mad about this and so mad about that. Every company has challenges. And the more leaders or employees think about what are those challenges and what if I could knock this one out by getting a smart group, the smartest group of people I can find to help me, and then communicate those things. There's no stopping those individuals. Those are the people that will get promoted and promoted and promoted again, because everybody needs more problem solvers. There's a lot of folks that are raising their hand to point out the problem. Like, can I tell you all the things, Biba, that are wrong? Can you please fix all these things for me?
Yeah.
And that's not what leaders are looking for. They're looking for people that can help them to solve challenges so that the whole company can go faster.
Yeah, that's a key point, is bringing also a solution or potential solutions. And I like the points you're bringing up is that you also have to spend some time to understand your boss's objectives, right? And business priorities, kind of business yearly goals, and how obviously what you're doing and what you're looking to take on, how it ties in and supports them.
Exactly. Every CEO of every company is standing up at least once a quarter saying, we have to do these three things. This is the North Star, and this is what we have to achieve to be successful. And so the people that want to get to the next level really have to think through how they can help to do that within their own role, and then communicate to your boss and your boss's boss. No, if I'm being repetitive, it's intentional when I include that second level boss, because that person is the one who, if your boss gets promoted, he or she is going to be trying to figure out who that next person is to take their place. So, communicating, what you can achieve and that you're aligned and on board with helping what the CEO is laying out is critical.
Great points. Let's talk about this kind of, I like the idea of demystifying the boardroom or the C-suite, because a lot of people have not been in it, have not worked as a part of it. So tell us, what is it and what happens there?
What happens in the boardroom?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so the board is hired by the CEO and by the chairman of the board to help the CEO and provide guidance to the management team. So it's usually a group of people that would include, if it's a private company, often it's the investors who own the company that are on the board. But as the company matures and gets larger, then they will typically bring on a CFO who's responsible for the financials and making sure that the audits are being done correctly. They'll oftentimes bring on a go-to-market leader like me to help the company to hit its growth objectives, and to also ensure that they're aligned with customer needs and customer requirements from a strategy standpoint. Often a sitting CEO, so someone who's also running a company, will be on to be a mentor and advisor to the CEO. And this is a group of people that all come together to provide governance for the CEO and help with strategy and planning and ensure the company is as high functioning as possible. If there ever is a CEO change, heaven forbid, the board is responsible for that, both in making any decisions as well as helping to recruit a CEO replacement. And then the board often works with the management team as well. So if I'm on a board, I tend to choose boards that are aligned to my background. They're high growth software companies, and I look for CEOs and CROs, chief revenue officers, and chief customer success officers that are looking for true help from the board. They want engagement where the board will get engaged and be involved to help the company to be more successful.
Great. So how would you describe kind of what is different about being a part of the C-suite versus being an employee in the rest of the organization? What are the key skills and attributes that are different that you need to have to belong or to enter that C-suite?
To enter the C-suite, yeah. Um, well, if you think about, inside of every organization that everyone listening is a part of, you think about what characteristics do those people have at the top. Um, we talked a bit about communication skills. They are great communicators. They're great collaborators. And they think outside of their own function. And I think that's where oftentimes people do get stuck a little bit, where if you're in marketing, you think a lot about marketing, and yet the C-suite isn't just thinking about marketing. They're thinking about how can I get growth up for my company? How can I expand reach and market share for my company? And so folks at the executive level are always thinking about the company's success, not their own success. They're very execution oriented, as you would expect, and also able to set aspirational goals and aspirational strategies that will really differentiate the company. So it takes courage to do that. I've spent a career encouraging sales people, individuals, to really think big. And instead of trying to achieve the bare minimum goal that allows you to come back next year for another year with the company, how do you set lofty goals and define a North Star that would just be so exciting to you and perhaps even a little scary to say out loud because, none of us like to fail. But setting lofty goals is a big part of leadership. Yeah, I think that those are a lot of the characteristics. I can't stress communications enough. You have to be really good at inspiring people and
Mhm.
getting them excited about where you're going. And that's true no matter what role you're in. I think people naturally think that sales leaders, of course, should be inspiring, but the best CFOs I've ever worked with are amazing at getting investors and customers excited about where the company is headed.
And it kind of throughout ties into the rest of our conversation and also in your book, where you're mentioning kind of one of the quote unquote mistakes is thinking too small. And let's talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. There is an author, gosh, over 100 years ago, named Napoleon Hill, and some will argue, did he really do the things that he said in his book? But the story goes that he was a reporter, a young reporter, not well known, and he was hired by Rockefeller to go interview the most successful people on the planet, and these were people like Alexander Graham Bell, um, Roosevelt, Henry Ford. I mean, just remarkable humans that changed our world. And he did that. And the reason for the book was to find out how these amazing geniuses, these wonderful people, did what they did so that he could teach every person around the globe how to do what they did. And his findings, and I'm paraphrasing, but his findings, or my key takeaway from the book, was that he found that most people actually do get what they want, but they set their goals too small. So, I want a new refrigerator, I want a new car, maybe I want a new house, maybe I want a new job, but these are tangible items that maybe you're going to achieve, next week, next month, next year. Uh, but that's not what humans are capable of, right? We are, even back when Kennedy said we're going to put a man on the moon, it was impossible. It wasn't physically possible at the time. And yet he said that, and as a result, we got to the moon. So I am a big believer that, we've all had, hopefully, coaches, teachers, mentors in our life that said, hey, you could do this, whatever this is. And you looked at him and said, no, I can't. I don't think so. And yet it put that thought in your head where all of a sudden you went out and achieved that you didn't know you could, where you just got that push or that nudge. And I am a big believer in that. You've got to give yourself permission and courage to dream a little bit if you want to achieve those lofty goals.
Is the book Think and Grow Rich
The book is Think and Grow Rich. Yes.
by Napoleon Hill? Yeah, it's probably like a self-help or self-development or manifestation classic. So I can appreciate you bringing it up. Um, Yeah, it's just there were so many things like that you were mentioning that I was thinking, we can go down these different routes. When do you recommend a person leaving a job? Like, let's say they do want to advance, right? They have goals, but when is it appropriate, kind of how to make that decision if to stay or when is the right time to leave a company or a job?
Yeah, so it depends. But one of the stories I open up with in the book is I share a story where, again, I'm in my mid 30s, early 30s, and I was very frustrated at my role. And I was planning to quit so I could write this book. Now, this is quite a while ago. And I was in my boss's office, and this was a very senior leader who was running North America for Cisco. And I was ranting about all the things that the company wasn't doing well that were getting in the way of, the teams being able to, best serve the company. And I was really ranting, and it was inappropriate a little bit, but I didn't care because I was leaving. And the halfway through the conversation, uh, this was my boss's boss stopped me and he said, "Do you want to come work for me?" And I said, "Doing what?" And he said, "Well, it's a new role, it's a strategy job, and I know a lot of sales leaders don't like to take strategy roles, but I'm thinking about creating this job, and would you do it?" And I thought to myself, well, I'm leaving, I'm quitting, so why wouldn't I go try this new job and see if I like that a bit better? And again, that was a life-changing decision for me too. This gentleman was a senior vice president, and I learned more in a year and a half working for him than I did in the last 10 years. Yes, he was just he had such different experience. And so that's a long way of saying, I think if you are in good standing, you're doing well in your role, but you're frustrated, I think it's really important to communicate to leaders, and probably not just your boss, probably a few others, that, hey, I'm really frustrated right now. I just don't see where we're heading. I feel stuck. I want to do more, whatever it is. But, I've tried very hard never to surprise a manager that if I was leaving the company, I always wanted that person to know that well in advance of me leaving so that they had a chance to help me. And oftentimes they did. And so I did stay on with that company, and it changed my career trajectory in a big, big way. And I'm super grateful that I didn't write the book 25 or 30 years ago, because I went on to achieve things I didn't know I could achieve. And uh, I also believe that I think the book is clearly going to be much more impactful now than it would have been 30 years ago. Um, with that said, there are times where you have communicated, what's where you want to go, and perhaps your manager is just not supporting you. And if that's true, and you've really tried, and you've gotten good feedback from your mentors about, is it your manager not supporting you, or is there something you're doing, right? A big piece of the mentee relationship is making sure you get honest feedback from your mentors. I've always said to my mentors, look, I respect you, and I really want to know what I need to do differently. So you're not going to hurt my feelings. Try to say it nicely, be constructive, but um, really try to get honest feedback from your mentors. And if they agree with you, excuse me, they agree with you that it's time to move on, well, then it is time to move on, and you need to be really thoughtful about where you're going to go next. I think that can be one of the more dangerous times when you're really unhappy in your job and you decide to make a move, because sometimes people will just run from instead of running to their next role. And now you could often be running from the fire and jumping into the frying pan. So if you're unhappy, being very thoughtful about how you choose that next job is important. And I'm happy to share more about that. That's a question I get often.
You know what? I love that you brought up that example because sometimes we can get caught up of needing or thinking that we need to be perfect or need to solve every problem ourselves in our own heads, or by ourselves. And that it's not that you don't always communicate or kind of things come through also not only through the perfect, like these wins, right? The perfect scenarios, that it's so important sometimes not to hold in also what would be harder conversations and the more quote unquote unpleasant conversations.
Yeah, you said something that was really important, Baiba. Throughout the book, I have tributes to uh, amazing women that have also climbed the corporate ladder and balanced a family and made it to the boardroom. I mean, these women are just extraordinary, and we I do a tribute to them, but then I also ask them for advice to their younger self. And one of the women is Blair Christie, who is the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer at Cisco. She's now a successful board member and CEO. And Blair's advice was, I'm paraphrasing, but get outside of your own head. So whatever that inner voice is repeating over and over and over again, write that down and take that and get external feedback on it. Is this voice true?
Mhm.
And use those mentors and friends and trusted advisors to get real feedback, and then you can move on, because now you can settle the issue once and for all.
Mhm.
Keep moving.
Yeah, yeah, kind of bring it out to light and scrutinize a bit more. Um, Kind of the voice in your head. But so we keep going back to that situation. You're in your 30s or 35, talking to a mentor, and through that comes this other opportunity. So you wanted to have more impact, right? And this person is asking you what exactly. How did you quantify then, either, in that spot or afterwards, right? When you thought about it, how did you quantify what it is that you're going after and what you
Yeah,
want?
so it wasn't instantaneous. It was not an instantaneous decision, but um, over the course of 6 months, a year, or 2 years, I decided that I wanted to run sales for a public company. And as I've shared a couple of times, it wasn't necessarily a linear path. I took this job and this job and this job, but I did, every time I was making a decision to go to the next role, sometimes inside of my company, but I did make some changes and moved outside of the organizations I was with. I always tried to weigh the decision. Does this make sense on my resume? Does this make sense on LinkedIn? Would someone who doesn't know me look at my resume and say, "Oh, wow, she went from here and then she took this job and then she took that job." That makes complete sense and logic. Uh, and that strategy worked out well for me. And again, sometimes they were lateral roles, but usually it was a lateral role taking on more responsibility or learning skills that I felt I would need 5, 10 years down the road.
And how did you get the clarity that, yes, I want to run sales? Because also this balance with mentors, right? People have their own paths and their own kind of strengths, and not, you're not going to duplicate somebody else's journey exactly. How did you get to kind of the clarity that, yes, sales leadership, that is what I want?
Probably by taking different roles that were outside of sales. So throughout my career, as I mentioned, I was managing accounts receivable. I was 26. I was a market analyst where I was really doing research. I took a strategy job where I was working for the gentleman I mentioned. Um, I took a number of different roles that were outside of a pure sales role. And whenever I did that, I found that I really missed leading sales organizations. So while I made the transitions, I always worked to get my way back there.
Okay. And let's go back to when you were in your 20s. You mentioned that you had this desire, this burning desire to manage people. When did you kind of first became aware that that's what you wanted to do, and where do you think it came from?
I don't know. I was managing people when I was 19 years old and 21 years old. So there might be something wrong with me in that respect because I would apply for one job and they would say, "Yeah, no, we want you to be the director of this program." I worked at a day camp in college and I said I wanted, I want this job. They said, "No, we want you to run the program." So I, for some reason, management was something that I was introduced to early on, and I really enjoyed it. And I like leading teams mostly because it's fun. It takes it takes strategy,
Mhm.
but also when you bring really smart people together, it's so amazing to me what you can accomplish. And I love watching people grow. So many of the folks that worked with me or for me years ago are now running companies. And that really makes me happy. I love seeing people succeed.
How would you define, because one of the points, right, that you also brought up strategy and kind of you just brought it up again. And I think that's one of the key differences, right? Sometimes between execution and then when you're in the boardroom, right, there's a lot of strategy, including like leadership roles. How would you define, in layman's terms, what is strategy, right? And how can one level set or assess for themselves? Is that something that would be a good fit for them and their skills?
Sure. Yeah. Well, as we talked about before, every CEO, CFO, chief product officer, they have goals and they are sharing them annually and quarterly inside the company and outside the company. And so strategy is something that individual contributors can do. You don't have to be a people manager to set strategy. We used to tell salespeople that you're the CEO of your territory. So if you're the CEO of a franchise, let's say McDonald's, if you don't have enough customers, you're in charge of marketing. You better go find a way to get customers to come in your door. If you're not clearing your revenue numbers, you have to cut expenses so that you can make sure that you can pay all your bills that week, month, and quarter. And businesses are the same. So everyone inside of the company can listen to whoever's running the company and say, "Hey, how does that relate to me? What are the three things that I can do that would really make a difference for me and my peers and my customer, whoever your customer might be?" That's strategy. And, usually starts with a big goal, it, I call it the North Star. And big is defined as if we achieve that, we'd all be high-fiving and pretty excited at the end of the year. And then what are the 3 to 5 things I can do and my team can do to back into that big idea? And it's not more complicated than that. I think people can make it more complicated. I will say I worked for a CEO once. I was new on my job and I was doing it all hands, and I think I'd been with the company for a month. So, I wanted to make sure that we were aligned. I was going through my presentation with him, and my call to action was, um, set a stretch plan, have a stretch plan to, do something great. And my CEO looked at me and he said, "Can we just say have a plan?" And I started laughing, I'm like, "Have a plan? What do you mean by that?" And he goes, "Well, Tracey, people don't have a plan. Like nobody has a plan. Like they don't write things down. And if it's not in writing, it's not a plan. If it's in your head, that's not a plan because you wake up the next day and you're not motivated and you've forgotten about whatever great thing you said you're going to do. So that is a big piece of strategy is what's your North Star? What are your initiatives? And then you have to write it down and then you have to socialize it with your boss and your peers to say, this is what I'm thinking. Do you agree? What would you change? What else should I have in this plan? And when you do that, then now you have something to come back to and report out on next quarter. And again, it's a great, back to the mentor or to the boss's boss. Could I come back to you on this plan in a quarter and share how am I doing and just get your feedback to make sure I'm still on track? I mean, no one's going to say no to that, but that's leadership. You're leading. Even if you don't manage people, you're still leading.
I love that because that can, I appreciate how you kind of broke it up in super simple terms. And anyone, this is an invitation, do that for your career, do that for your work, business or professional, your own plan, have that North Star. And then, like you said, break it down in a few steps. And then, when you have that bigger goal, not just a goal, I love that, kind of what you shared, and that will, it kind of does something to our mind and the possibilities, and it opens up. And yes, it's kind of like you said, it takes courage and any growth, right? There will be things that you haven't done and that will be uncomfortable, but also the rewards and kind of like I think your own self-fulfillment and self-worth and kind of that how you will feel intrinsically, like the reward is so much bigger.
Completely. I one of the harder times for me was when I was home on maternity leave, and after a couple of months, I would look around the house and go, "Gosh, what did I do today? I cleaned the house 5 times. I did the dishes 19 times. I did 20,000 loads of laundry, and the house is a wreck." Like what did I accomplish? Whereas if you're actually writing things down and then creating tasks and chopping away at making progress, it's really fulfilling. And talk about a confidence builder too. Then it makes it so much easier to get out of the way of the reason why so many women have a hard time communicating. When you're making progress like that, it's easy to say, "Gosh, look what we've done," and get people excited about doing even more.
I love that. And I love kind of there's a sense of ease also that comes through kind of what you said, managing teams is fun. Um, I think that's important, right? In whatever you pick, that it's aligned with what is also fun for you to solve, right? What is fun? It's not just like this excruciating weight, right? Problem, never ending kind of like dreadful thing, that would be a really, really hard climb. But how did you realize that it's also fun? This is like it gives something to you. It looks like it also gives you energy.
Yeah, so we spend a lot of time working. And so I feel strongly that if I'm going to spend a good part of my waking day working, I better like what I'm doing. And more than even liking my job, I need to feel like my company is winning, that the mission of the company is important. That one of my favorite jobs, I was working at a cybersecurity company. I mean, that's important. If you can't get excited about that, you're protecting people's assets and their lives and governments and countries. So I really want to be excited about the mission. And that kind of goes back to what you were asking earlier too. How do you know when it's time to leave? One reason is for sure what I said. You just don't have the support of your manager, their manager. You've expressed that you want to do more. You're just not making progress. You're stuck. But another reason I would knew that it was time for me to leave. Excuse me. Excuse me. But when I had this sense of smoldering discontent, you know, if the CEO was talking about something and in my head, like, I don't see it. I don't agree. And that feeling's going on for months, quarters. Then I knew that was my signal. You need to go find something that you are excited about again. Um, but choose carefully. Over time, I developed a real process for moving on around um, literally open an Excel spreadsheet. I was told by a good friend of mine who's a very successful executive search leader. And he said, open up an Excel spreadsheet and in the first column, write down all your criterias. I want to work for a public company, a private company. I want to work for a CEO who's a founder. I want to work for a multi-time CEO who has had huge success. I want to work with this kind of product that's important, where I'm excited about the mission, this kind of culture inside the company. And then, really, I encourage people to kiss, if not 100 frogs, kiss 50 frogs. Like, look at 50 companies literally. A lot of people will follow folks from one job to another, and that can be a mistake because people make mistakes sometimes. Great, really smart people could choose poorly, and now you're stuck at a company that that person leaves, and now here you are. So I really encourage people to be very intentional. If you're going to move from one company to another, be really thoughtful. Great advice was talk yourself out of the job. Everyone's always trying to talk themselves into the job, but I want to know what I'm getting into before I take a new role. So, be really intentional so you land in a great place where you can have a lot of fun.
So that's a great actually point in terms of like clarifying that North Star is you, with your experience, as you understand yourself and kind of the different areas that are important to you, that work for you and don't work for you. The kind of that's what that Excel solves. And the more you can um, qualify, quantify, whatever you want to call it, right? Or name those attributes. And it's a great kind of decision making reference tool, right? When you're evaluating opportunities. And I think it also ties into so many kind of things that we discussed and you brought up before. It ties into these again. There's also analogy with the relationships, right? Do you want a great relationship or good enough, or any relationship, right? Because you want to be with somebody. And the same with your work relationships, like all of these things have a huge impact on the quality of your life. And like you said, sometimes we talk ourselves into things versus going back, and that Excel can provide such clarity, right? It can be such a guidepost.
Exactly. So if you write your attributes in the column going down across the top row, you're going to start filling out company one, company two, company three, and rating them on each of the characteristics 1 to 5. And you will start to know very early on within, if you've looked at 20 companies, the 21st comes in, nope, that doesn't fit this criteria. Nope, that doesn't fit the other criteria. And I counsel people for whether it's for an operating job, joining a company, or whether it's for a board. People often say, I want a new job. I want to get a board seat. And I laugh at, because I've learned through the years, no, you don't. You don't want a new job. You want a great new job. You want an amazing new job. You want an amazing board seat
Yes.
that where you can make a ton of impact, and where where you're going to be fulfilled and you're going to enjoy it for years. And so to me,
Yeah.
that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, and kind of we forget, and it's so easy just kind of like when you're frustrated, when you're just like, I'm just done with this, I just want something better. Like you said, you don't want to work for any board, even earlier in the conversation, right? There have to be things that in alignment, the collaboration, right? Driving for a mission that you can subscribe to, that aligns. And these things are so important and so easy kind of when we're in it, like it sometimes almost takes an outside clarity voice, like to bring us back. So I know we've gone over time. Tracey, what is something maybe that I didn't ask that you'd love to share, and share kind of how can people follow you, find you, and learn more from you?
Oh, well, thank you so much, Baiba, for having me here today. It has been lovely. And yeah, no, as you picked up on through our time together, my mission in life, I just believe people are capable of so much more than they even know. And so my hope and goal is that everyone listening will take a step back and spend a little bit of time thinking about what makes you happy, what brings you joy, and what would be the wildest thing that you could think about doing, and write that down and start to socialize a little bit with people that know you and care about you. Because I believe the power of human potential is just truly unstoppable. I've seen it over and over again. And if you want to spend more time following me, certainly I'm on LinkedIn. And you can also follow me on my website, which is tracy-newell.com. And if my book is it can be pre-ordered now, so you'll see that on my website. And I just really appreciate you all spending time with us today.
I love it. And the book is called Hers for the Taking, Your Path to C-Suite and Beyond.
That's
And
it.
I will link what you mentioned, and the links to it in the show notes as well. Tracey, thank you so much.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much and have a great day.